At this time, we will call the meeting to order. And at this time, we will begin with item number 2, which is public comment.
Yes, we have 5 people signed up for public comments, so I am going to call you up by the order I received them in. And if you can go to the podium, state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll have the timer back here. So first person is Paul Galvani.
Hello, I'm Paul Galvani, 2926 Fairway Drive in Sugar Creek. This is the 4th meeting of this committee that my wife and I have attended, and I've yet to hear answers to some questions I'm about to pose. Hence, I am here asking them in person. We've heard an awful lot about the potential regionalization of the Sugarland Animal Shelter. And what we would like to know is the following. What are the benefits of regionalization to the citizens of Sugarland? Secondly, what are the benefits to the animals of Sugarland of regionalization? And is anyone on this committee or on the Sugarland City Council aware of any citizen of Sugarland, not a member of City Council, that is in favor of regionalization? And if so, what are their reasons for being in favor of regionalization? When the task was given to Mr. Valenzuela to regionalize the operation of the animal shelter, we would like to know what the impetus for this request was and how this task was conveyed. In other words, were you asked to merely evaluate regionalization, or were you asked to justify regionalization? Did you have the freedom to evaluate options other than regionalization? Were you asked to reduce costs of the shelter operations? Or were you asked to find the optimal solution to handling our animal population? How was this task requested? Finally, in November of 2019, 3.5 years ago, in the words on the city's website, quote, Sugarland voters decisively approved 4 general obligation bond proposals, end quote. One of those bond proposals was $6.6 million for the design and construction of the new animal shelter. This passed with a 60% approval, so almost 2 out of 3 citizens who voted approved of this proposal. This proposal was an original recommendation of the facilities master plan of 2015, now 8 years ago. So 8 years hence, we still don't have what we need. My question is, why have these funds not already been spent? So in summary, benefits of regionalization to the citizen animals. Anyone in favor of regionalization? When and how was this task conveyed? And why has the money not been spent? Thank you very much.
The next person is Charlene Avery. You can please go to the podium, Charlene. You have 3 minutes. State your name and address.
Hello, I'm Charlene Avery, 4523 Topaz Trail. I think everyone is aware of the concerns surrounding Best Friends advising Sugarland to look at El Paso and Pasco counties to model after. El Paso citizens have literally been out in the streets protesting how their taxpayer-funded animal shelter is refusing to take dogs into their shelter after adopting the Haas Community Shelter Program. On paper, the idea looks good. In reality, has proven it does not work. Fort Bend County has been advising finders that if they cannot keep, to return animals to where they were found, even if it was on the streets. I do rescue out there. I'm not making this up. That's a fact. They're also not helping finders or fosters with medical care and food costs. Even with this model, if the finder cannot keep, the shelter is still supposed to take. That's not happening. Why is Sugarland looking at this? Why do we want to merge with them? Myself and others are very confused about why, after a year of study and regionalization, you still are not sharing what you have found to date and your thoughts moving forward. Now you state you will look at other cities. Why? We don't need Missouri City, Stafford's, or Richmond Rosenberg's problems. We have enough of our own. It is because you want to use the land for something else? I'd like to know, don't you? Why are you not going back to City Council right now and telling them that you have researched for over a year and it's not a good, feasible idea? We already know it will cost more to build cost more per animal, and cost more to maintain. So saving money is not the reason why our city leaders are looking at this as an option. So what is it? What are your short-term solutions? You have to know that you have to have something in place now. The time is now. I mean, we're over capacity all the time. And I want to thank every single shelter staff member, every single volunteer, because they work day and night to try to help the situation. But until we get in a portable building or something, we're going to have to start looking outside that box, because what we're doing now is just not working. And I think we have a lot of smart people here in the city of Sugar Land, and I think we can make this work. What about using that 10,000 grant money to buy another temporary building? What about doing something else outside of the box? We can do this. As a new territory resident and administrator of our Lost and Found Pet Group, we work very hard daily at keeping our strays out of the shelter in the first place. We have reunited 6+ dogs in the last week and a half alone. We also trapped a dog who had been on the run for 3 to 4 days. We set up our
You
own
have 30
feeding
seconds.
station. We went and got trapped from shelter and we set it up. We caught him. Now that dog is at the shelter where he's being taken care of, might I say, very nicely. One more thing, I have talked briefly with Cindy about how to expand our Lost and Found efforts with other neighborhoods to try to expand this coordination. I would like to speak more with her about that. We want to help. Let us help. We've been offering to help. We've been denied a bunch of times. We're here. You say you want the community's help? Here we are. Ask us. We'll do it. Thank you.
The next person is Liz Harfin. Excuse me if I say your last name wrong. Lynn.
Hi, my name's Lynn Harpham. I live at 4003 Brenner Court, in Sugar Land. 4 days ago, the citizens of Fort Bend voted yes on $1 billion school bond. By voting yes, our citizens agreed that these investments in our schools are warranted, and yes, we're willing to pay that bill. We said yes, build a new middle school, build a new elementary school, update the technology, build a new natatorium. In response, the Fort Bend superintendent said the district will proceed to plan for its next steps immediately. How shocked and disappointed will our citizens be if 4 years from now, not a single step has been taken to repair a school or build a new campus? And if the superintendent then says, well, we might change our minds, we might look at different ideas, we might merge with another district, who knows? We don't have to guess how the citizens might feel, because this is exactly the way the people feel who supported the $6.6 million animal shelter 3.5 years ago. We said, yes, build a new shelter after the city put it to a vote in 2019. And then the city completely disregarded the agreement it made with the citizens. This is the opposite of transparency. It's arrogant and disrespectful, and it violates the public trust that a city government ought to hold sacred. So here we sit with a 15-year-old shelter that is frequently over capacity, with 65 dogs and 43 cats right now, twice as many dogs as it can hold. When a shelter is constantly over capacity, that's not a temporary problem, it's a failure to plan. League City, which looks very, very close to Sugar Land in so many ways, they don't close for capacity, and so their numbers are probably more true. They take in about 2,500 animals a year. With a 20-day rehoming cycle, that's about 135 animals in the shelter at any time. That's probably our number. That's probably the number we should be planning on. We would not tell our citizens, sorry, there just aren't enough garbage trucks to accommodate your neighborhood. We're over capacity. Sorry, there isn't a classroom for the kindergartners of River Bend. We're over capacity. Sorry, we don't have enough police to write a report for the break-in at Berry Hill. We're over capacity. Animal services is not just for the animals. It also keeps our citizens safe from roaming strays, and it provides a service for residents who think they live in a nice city with the resources to care for lost animals. We need to think of animal services the same way we think about these other services and demand that it meets the needs of the city. We need a solution to the capacity issues at the shelter now, before budgets are finalized. We need temporary housing to triple the existing cat and dog capacity, and we need additional workers to handle the increased load. We wouldn't add a temporary building to a local school and not put a teacher in it, and buildings alone won't solve this issue either. Excuse me. This city has an
You have 30
obligation.
seconds.
This city has an obligation to the cities who already agreed to pay the cost, and we should not subject the workers or the volunteers to a low standard of animal care, which right now includes a whole bunch of animals out in the exposed to the elements. And soon enough, that means high heat and humidity. We need to fix it now. Thank you.
Next, I have Diana Wright Latham. Your name and address, please. 3 minutes.
name is Diana Wright Latham, and I live at 251 Cedar Elm Lane. And I am coming again because and once I've started coming to these meetings and so many things are spoken about, I don't see a lot of follow up on them. I know things take time, but we need stuff now. Everyone is trying to stress that to us. Something needs to be done now. And maybe the city council just doesn't feel like it's important enough. That's the message that they convey by brushing everything aside, by turning away help that's been offered to them. A lot of people have offered to volunteer, and a lot of that's not gone through with the excuse of the dog was too big or whatever. And things like maybe we could do something to take some of the responsibility off of them. If money's the problem, then maybe we could get a group together to get some of these people that love animals, but are not comfortable, getting up and talking about it, but they'd be happy to do something, do some fundraisers or something on our own to help add to the money that was supposed to be given to these animals to build this shelter. I don't know how much effect it could make, but I know I work over 60 hours a week, but I would find the time if I could find people that were interested in doing anything we can to try and get something done, since we can't seem to get any help from city council, or they keep turning away things that people suggest, opportunities that are missed out on. And this city has grown so much in the last 20 years that it's like, ridiculous that we don't increase everything, all of our services in the meantime. I mean, when I moved here 30 years ago, we had a population of 69,000. Now we have over 100,000 people here. And obviously people that move here, a lot of them have pets and things happen. We've all had an animal get out from the gate at one time or another. And, the fact that they're going to send these animals to another town, just to me, it makes it sound like they just don't want to bother with the problem. It's something that's too unimportant to them. They'd rather spend it on something that looks flashy and might draw in people here to, spend a lot of money on beautiful homes and things like that. But every home and every family that moves out here, I would say at least 50% of them are going to bring pets with them, and children that either have a pet or need a pet or want a pet. And, if we don't have the services to support them when they get out for whatever reason, they slip away, or if someone's dropped them off out here in this area, and we have no way or no care enough to
30
have
seconds.
something that's, will allow the capacity for that. To me, it makes me feel a bit ashamed of the way this is being handled from our politicians. If they want us to support them, they need to support some of the things that are our interests as well.
Next, we have Pansy Chung. State your name and address, please.
So I'm Pansy Chung, 2731 Country Club. Okay, first of all, I want to congratulate Cindy and Julian on their promotions. And I was going to talk about regionalization today, but I realized on the agenda, the word's been replaced by partnership. So I'm going to use these terms interchangeably. My main question still is, what are we trying to accomplish by partnering with other entities or regionalizing with them? And why is the city focusing so much resources on that? And this is a genuine question, because what I found is there are cities with less resources than Sugar Land who are running their local shelters with good save rate and good stray control. Good example would be Lake County in Florida. They're a local shelter doing a great job despite not being a wealthy community like Sugar Land. Lake County's median household income is $60,000 with 10% poverty rate. Sugar Land's median income is $110,000 with 5% poverty rate. Lake County began implementing the no-kill equations in 2017, and quickly they began to save 99% of their animals, which includes many large breeds and pit bulls. They did so despite a rundown facility and a skimpy budget. In 2020, they constructed a new shelter that holds over 160 dogs and over 100 cats. And in 2021, when the entire sheltered industry struggled, Lake County still saved 99% of their dogs. And in the past AAB meetings, we were presented with a few examples that Sugar Land may want to follow, which is Williamson County, Wilco, Pasco County, and El Paso Animal Shelter. These all are massive shelters. And for example, in 2021, El Paso takes in more than 16,000 animals, and their save rate was 83%, landing more than 3,000 animals killed that year. Sugar Land is already doing better than that as a local shelter. So why are we looking at that as models? 2 out of these shelters have very low save rate. And Williamson County is only staying above water because They're adamantly obliging to their no-kill methods and are very active in engaging with their communities, but they're still struggling. So going back to our question, what are we trying to accomplish by merging with another entity? Is it about money? Because in other meetings, we said it wasn't. And as a matter of fact, to merge with another shelter, it'll take more money. All these data shows that merging shelters to create a massive animal warehouse is a bad idea. Along the same lines, by merging with a private entity, we lose public oversight and transparency. So the fact of the matter is most shelters across the nation are struggling with overcrowding as part of pandemic consequences, inflation. So if merging with another entity is a knee-jerk reaction to those issues, we can rest assured the problem will continue if we don't try to restructure shelter operations. And as a matter of fact, the results will worsen with animal warehousing. The trend of sheltering is to keeping it small, local, and having it very visible to the public for good save rates. I'm not sure if this has to do with like land utilization in Sugar Land, but I plead that we keep our shelter to be managed by Sugar Land and to keep it small and local. Okay, thank you.
And the last person I have signed up is Sumita Ghosh. State your name and address, please. You have 3 minutes.
So, hi, I'm Smita Ghosh, and I live at 4607 Kennesaw Court, down the street. So this is my first time speaking at the Animal Advisory, at the Animal Advisory Board meeting. I feel like I should be setting up camp out here, but because I spoke last night too about the land use plan, and I always try to put in a different perspective, just because I'm weird, I guess. But I really want to focus on the lack of transparency and the lack of respect that the city has shown to its citizens, because in this whole process, I literally got involved in this 5 years ago when I filed a Texas Open Records Act request to get numbers, because someone pointed out to me that these numbers on euthanasia were just not making sense, and we've never actually gotten an answer as to how the city of Sugar Land was calculating its euthanasia rates when people could see with their own eyes that animals were dying at much higher rates than the 90% survival rate that the city was reporting. And so that's never gotten answered. And then I was like, oh, well, here's my chance. I worked fervently. I was part of the editorial from the Chronicle that pushed the bond. And so, I was like, way back when, the recent bond, but way back when I was like, finally, city of Sugar Land, my parents have lived here since 92. And so I was like, finally, we're going to not have to worry. And then again, why are we here? I'm like, where's the shelter? Why are we here? Why is the city of Sugar Land basically discounting the voices of all of its citizens? We voted for this, and just to be a subtle threat, we're watching city council, mayor, well, he's term limited, but we're watching and we're trying to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And we're going to take it personally and we vote. I'm precinct chair. And so, this is just ridiculous. I'm like, where's the shelter? $6.6 million. There's not a problem. They have the land. They have the architect. They have the volunteers. And I personally think it's insulting what the city is doing to the Animal Advisory Board. Why are you here if no one's going to listen to anything you have to say? I mean, I can understand I'm just a lowly citizen. They can ignore me. But you guys have been devoting so much time and energy and deep thought. And I'm always impressed. I served on the Ethics Task Advisory Board. And you guys are amazing. We have some amazing people on the advisory board. And to be ignored and poo-pooed by this city is just an insult. And I'm sorry for you. And I'm sorry for our city that we're here. We're the most generous zip code in the entire state of Texas, and we're kicking out animals and letting them live, God forbid, where on their own for no reason at all, when we have the money and the resources and the expertise here already. So thank you.
That is the last person I have signed up. Is there anyone here that would like to speak and has not signed up? This is your chance. Okay, hearing none. Cherry, we may move to the next item.
Okay, Were there any written comments submitted?
No.
Yes. At this time, we will close public comment and move on to item number 3, minutes. So in consideration, item A, in consideration of an action on the minutes of March 8th, 2023 meeting, is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes that were sent out?
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the March meeting.
I second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. Now we will move on to item number 4, workshop item A. Review of and discussion on animal shelter partnership options. Rob? Oh, I'm sorry, Rob and sorry.
Yes, yes. So animal shelter partnerships, wanted to kind of give this board a quick update. Is it me or has it been, it seems like haven't been here for a while. It's just been a long month.
Skipped a few months, or we skipped.
Every
a month.
other month. Okay, because I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, man, what did we cover last time? Because it's been a while since I've been up here. And so a couple things I do want to talk about. To give a board the update, I know Dawn went and visited Williamson County Shelter, trying to get an understanding of kind of how they operate. I know there's been a group of us who has gone down there and visited with them. Dawn wasn't part of that group, so I know she had went down there and visited with Misty, their director, took tours, pretty much the same thing that I think all of us have been through so far. At the end of the day, took away some good takeaways. I would keep in mind, you know, there's been a lot of talk on the shelters that we visit with, either take tours of or have phone calls with. You know, the thought of taking that program and implementing it here. Those programs work well where they're at. The intent is not that. The intent is to gather some research on different programs that they may work and may not work, and will it work here, yes or no? And when we start talking about regionalization, this board is very adamant of as an option of looking at our existing facility and our existing operations, and that kind of being the base as we move forward. And the thought with going through some of this research and looking at these programs is what works well over there, will it work here? Is it something that we should consider from a service level as we move forward from a partnership standpoint? And so it's not the fact that we want to take the Williamson County model and transplant it from Williamson County to Fort Bend County and say this is what we want in Sugar Land, Texas, or the Pasco model and implement it here in Sugar Land, Texas. There might be bits and pieces that make sense, and there's going to be most of it doesn't. But trying to understand what does that look like as we move forward when we start talking about options and levels of service and those types of things. Regardless, when we do start to get to that point, then I will take full accountability for not getting here fast enough, if you will. But I want to make sure that I have a good understanding of what's out there before I bring it back to the board to start talking about levels of service. Level of service is going to be a big discussion as we move forward with this board. We're going to want to talk about where are we at today and what can partnerships look like and bring to the table, and get y'all's input into that. If you recall, that was one of the things that I committed to y'all, as y'all would be part of that conversation as we move forward. That when the time is right and when I have enough information, that I'll be bringing it back to y'all to have those discussions. Because at some point I need to make a recommendation to council. They will take action. They're the ones who will vote on it. I just present the facts in our discussions as we move forward. And so we will have those discussions. I'm not ready. I'm not to a point where we can have a good discussion about it, but when the time is right, we'll bring those facts to the table and we'll have that discussion. And so that was I've already committed that to y'all in previous meetings. So we're talking to them. I also want to understand kind of what is the appetite within the county, if you will. If we did a regional partnership, or what does that look like? So we want to talk to some of our neighboring cities to understand kind of what their thoughts are about it are, just to understand kind of what's the thought of the county, what's the temperature of it. So we want to start having those conversations as well. And so we're going to start reach out. We reached out to a couple already. We're going to continue to reach out to a few more. I want to be able to present and speak to y'all about that as well. Because having one city pushing or being a regional partner, I don't know if it's much a region at that point, but trying to figure out how do we better utilize our resources as a group, if you will, as we move forward. And so we'll start that process and continue with that process rather. And when I get some of that feedback, I'll more than happy to share what we find out. Smith, you had a question?
Do you have a list of things that you're asking as you go into the other communities yet, or is it just a more informal discussion?
Just very informal at this point. There's no formal agenda. It's just kind of very high level, kind of getting some thoughts. At some point, I want to get to that point, and that's where I can have enough information where we can have a robust discussion about it. Because right now there's not much to report back. And so that's kind of the next step. I still want to continue on the tour of good shelters out there. I think one of the speakers talked about League City. I think that'd be a good fit for us to go out there and visit with them and just kind of document kind of some of the things that they do well. Not to say that what works in League City will work in Sugar Land, but there might be bits and pieces that do at some point. And depending on the direction that we move forward, it gets rolled into a future recommendation or not. I mean, those are things that we'll talk about. But I think there was another example from Florida I wrote down as well. And so that's another one that we would probably want to reach out to them and just have that conversation like we had with the others and kind of understand kind of what types of level of service do they provide. Animal services, as you all know, and for those who don't know, is very different in every single community. So it's very hard to benchmark either costs or a certain number of days, those types of things. It's very hard to do that because all the programs are different in every community. There's a core set of services that every shelter provides, but a lot of different folks have either different partnerships with foster programs or not. They have a more active community or not. And so it's really hard to compare one shelter versus another shelter because the amount of services and support around each shelter varies as you go around. And so that's part of the hard part, to figure out what is a good shelter, because it's just all over the place from a service level standpoint and the support around it at the end of the day. And so that's going to be part of it. And so we're going to continue down that path. We're still in the research mode. And like I said, as soon as I start to have a little bit more information where we can actually have some more robust discussions around things, we will come back. Now, with respect to time, I will take, like I mentioned earlier, it's taken a little bit longer than I had thought it was going to take us to get to this point, but we're making some progress on seeing some finality on some of these stages of research. And so I will focus on that and try to wrap that piece up and get it back to this board so we can start having discussions. So with that, take any questions from the board.
Okay, I'll try to flip some of the audience questions because you can't answer them directly. What benefit?
Oh, go.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, what benefits are we looking at from a regionalization, or I guess the level of service is how you put it?
So there's a couple of things. So the service levels, those are things that we're going to look at. Service levels are things that we currently do from programs, from either partnerships, the amount of partnerships that we have, or it's the foster programs that we have, or it's the volunteers that we have. When we look at doing partnerships in this regional sense, we all compete for those limited amount of resources. And I think it kind of shows, especially, when we had the overpopulation of dogs. Every shelter is having an overpopulation of animals right now, and we're all competing for those exact same resources. We're all competing for foster programs. We're all competing for volunteers to come help. We're all competing for people to come adopt. We're all competing in that same realm. All these shelters are trying to do that, and the ability to regionalize everything, to have the ability for volunteers who want to volunteer to come volunteer and make a big impact in a regional area, I think is one of our benefits at the end of the day. It's not about the dollars, it's not about the land. I know that was comments earlier. But it was more of how can we leverage our resources to do good in the region. That's one way. Last month or 2 months ago, maybe we took an agreement to council to help with spay and neuter with the county. They have a facility. They didn't have a vet. We have a vet. We don't have a facility. So the ability to leverage those resources for spays and neuters is huge. Because we can't adopt animals out until we spay or neuter them. And so having that partnership is a good example of how partnering together helps us reduce those times that animals have to be in shelters at the end of the day, waiting on spays and neuters to allow them to be adopted. So that's one of those examples of how regionalization can be beneficial at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. What do you think now of the Haas program and the leaving strays in the street? Do you think that will come to Sugar Land?
I'm not familiar with the program. I would say that's a program that is out there, I would assume, based upon the comments. It coming to Sugar Land, I mean, that's an operational decision. That's a board discussion. I'd imagine that Dawn would have with this board if that was something that we wanted to do. I don't think it would be, but.
So, and I know that that's been a concern is, I guess, the negative programs that these, I'll say, shelters that we're talking with, but every shelter has good and bad, right? I mean, if El Paso was doing the same research and they were talking to us and their citizens Googled the Sugar Land Animal Shelter, like what would they find, right? It's not all good. And so what we're doing is we're having conversations about what their programs are, what the community involvement is. Okay, we like that program. Like, should we try it here? It's not, we're like Rob said, we're not taking that model and you're doing these things. Now we're going to do all of these things because you're successful at or not. It's taking the bits and pieces to make our program better. And so we're talking about regionalization. And then someone also asked, like, what other options are we looking at? Well, we have a shelter, right? So part of my job is, what do we need to do to make it better? And we are doing those things. We are, and you'll hear and see more, like we're adding programs, we're growing programs, we're doing a lot of the things that we're being told we're not doing, like we are doing them. We're adding staff on the back end. We are partnering with rescues, even though we're not publishing it on social media every day. Like you'll see a chart soon, the number of rescue or cats and dogs that are going to rescue each month. So, but we're learning what others doing, like Pasco County, their volunteer program is so robust. Like they have job descriptions for volunteers, and it's like 30 plus volunteers that have a job description that we only have 40 active volunteers, but we have 100 plus on the roster. How can we get our volunteers to engage like their volunteers engage? Because y'all don't. You say you want to help, but you don't come. You have to submit the volunteer application to be able to come in and help the shelter. So we are talking with them and then trying to implement those here. And you see each month we change every single month. We have new programs that we launch. We bring on new staff. We add new staff. Like we are growing and changing based on what we're learning from other shelters. And we'll continue to do that until we get to a decision. So part of the option is, what do we have right now that will be considered? And I'm constantly, and Cindy and Jillian, we're constantly changing it for the better. And if you come into the shelter, you would see that. You would talk to staff, you would talk to volunteers. We are making a difference every day.
Yeah, are we still, is warehousing still on the table, building a big giant shelter for the entire county?
I don't know. I don't know where that perception came from. I haven't heard of that. I think that perception could come from folks with their own definition of what regionalization could look like. But I'm not sure where that concept came from. So to your question of a big warehouse filled with animals, I don't see that.
Okay.
But I don't understand where that came from.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for me.
I just have one question. You kind of mentioned this earlier, and first of all, thank you for the continued updates like this with what you're doing and the commitment to have something to us to review. With that in mind, what is a projected timeline that you have in mind? When can we expect to see like a first draft of something? I think about that from like, a project management standpoint. Before I came here today, I had to submit a project outline for my job for a program I got to have ready and recommend dates and all that. So what are you thinking or have in mind for by August 15th, we will have something for the board to review?
Yeah, in full disclosure, I had initially, when I agreed to help Dawn with it, I originally had agreed that I thought it'd be by summertime, we'd be having, April is the timeframe. And by summertime, we'd be having decisions made. The reality is, as we got into research, it's not as easy as going to somebody's website and Googling it, right? It means that you have to find time when other people are available. It means you have to make trips out there to go visit them. You have discussions and you find additional resources or additional places that do it well. And that adds to the number of places that you research and you start that process all over. And so it became quickly pretty evident that the April timeframe wasn't going to work. And I told this board, probably the last meeting that from a research standpoint, the research would be done when we finished researching, if you will. Meaning that we didn't want to shortchange it. We didn't want to rush it. We wanted to make sure that we captured what we needed to capture at the end of the day. That being said, my new date in my mind is hopefully by the end of the calendar year, we would have something decided, if you will, by council. So what does that mean? You mean council making a decision? So backing up from, I would say, end of the calendar year, in my head, it's that kind of October-ish timeframe, because by the time you hit November, December, you're hitting into vacation and holidays, and everybody starts to scatter after that. And so if you back up from there, it starts to pin it into the summertime where we start to unveil some certain things, at least start to have those discussions with y'all, because there's going to be back and forth feedback that I need to take from y'all to incorporate into it. Or not, and then kind of make a recommendation based upon that. So we're going to ramp that up. Like I said, I need to focus a little bit better on getting some of the research wrapped up so we can start bringing things forward to you. So I don't have an exact date like August 16th. I will bring something back yet, but I will commit to working on something like that.
Okay, I thank you. And that, just to conclude, that's helpful. I appreciate the end of the calendar year. And even though there's not specific dates, it gives us kind of a perspective of, by the end of the calendar year, we're aiming for something to, what you mentioned, to happen, so that hopefully, like you said, by the end of summer, we may expect a first pass at some summarization of content, recommendations, et cetera. So that gives a viewpoint.
Understand that it could speed up and slow down. And speed up,
Sure.
slow down. So I use it as guidelines and as bumper guards, if you will, knowing that we have the room to flex a little bit if we need to.
Okay, no, that gives me a kind of a line of sight into maybe what to expect with the resources and stuff like that coming back to us.
I would envision a busy summer and an early spring.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to add to that comment. If you're saying that you hope for something to be presented to City Council in October for an end of year decision, then that means your final version of whatever it is you're presenting to them is going to be ready in October. Right now, we are having meetings every other month, and I realize that can be changed at will, but still, that means that rough draft of that comes between, we're not having a meeting in June. So we have July, August, September, October. That's a small number of months, in my opinion, for such a large number of decisions and topics.
I say it's October. It could bump into November, I would really try to stay at December, because it gets really hard to get, there's a lot of things going on in December, but it could flex into November. But yes, you're all right. We're getting a little crunched on the back end. So I want to make sure that we're getting it to you in time, that you have enough time to review it, ask questions, incorporate your feedback.
And I would encourage the part of her conversation with you that sticks out to me is she's talking project management or some more formal structure to your decisions and our decisions. And I would love to see something
Schedule.
more formal. And I am really concerned about us getting to the end and me walking into a meeting where this is going to be presented to us at this meeting for decisions at this meeting, and then the next meeting is going to be city council, where they are making decisions, and we don't have enough time in there
Okay.
to either absorb everything that needs to be reviewed
Okay.
or to understand and ask questions and have the back and forth discussion that I think is the intent of this advisory board.
Yep, no, I agree.
Thank you.
And what we can do is like I said, I'll work on that schedule. We'll get it out to you guys. And there again, I try to avoid that, putting you all in that position of not having enough time to do your job. And so if we need to move things around, then that's the time. Their dates on a paper, we can move them around at this point. And so making sure if we got to convert it back to a monthly meeting to make that happen, or we got to push a little bit longer, those are options. But I agree.
Okay, Rob, this is all fine and good, but right now we have a crunch and we need a solution, a short-term solution to our overpopulation and our own shelter. So are we looking, I mean, are we going to use Duhasek Park again to put our dog, our extra dogs? I mean, what are we doing now? I mean, we've obviously, city council isn't going to move on this bond. Has there been any discussion at city council about the bond that we all approved? Or, where are we on all this? I mean, we need help now. We need fosters big time. We need volunteers, as Dawn said. I mean, several of us on the board do volunteer and we're there, but we need help. We need a lot of help. So what are we doing now?
And I will say, I think Don's gonna hit on that after I wrap up here as well. Have any other questions? Bring it out. Yeah. I did have one follow-up question. I forgot to mention it earlier. But it talks about, or speaks a little bit. I owe a follow-up to the board on, I believe Jenna had asked probably 2 board meetings ago now of, is there the possibility of one of the board members going out with us when we talk to shelters or those types of things? I told her, hang on, let me think through that a little bit and kind of move forward. I had kind of posed it as I think I'd responded, well, we typically, when we do projects, we have internal teams that we work with, and that's why you have professional staff to go do the work and then bring it back in your roles as board members is to review, provide comments and feedback to the professional staff, and then they move on, incorporate it, make adjustments, document it, whatever the case might be. And so I finally wrestled around that area. I'm gonna move forward in the stance of very similar to projects and those types of things. We have an internal team that's working on it. So we're going to continue to work with that team and utilize the board as that sounding board to receive feedback and comments and go from there. So at this point, we're not recommending or including a member of the board in that research team or in that internal team. But we've got a pretty diverse group of folks internally that'll be working on it. So. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed John's not here today, and so John.
Oh, yes, John.
Yeah, so John Neiman had brought up the topic of interim actions to our, whatever the end result of our plan is. And I would just say that as I think through that and listen to the comments, that would probably be a good update for you guys going forward, because no matter the council decision, it's going to take some time to implement whatever that end result is. And that instead of having people, I know that you're doing things that are interim steps. And so maybe calling a slide or something interim steps. And then as we get closer to the end result, being able to show some of those larger interim steps would answer the questions. It would seem to me, since you're already doing it, maybe just structuring it to answer that question as one of your updates might be beneficial. Your decision. It's just, I think it could be helpful.
All right, thank you all so much.
And now we will move on to item number 4, workshop item B, review of and discussion on animal shelter and community engagement program updates by Cindy King and Jillian Hinshaw.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I've added something on interim steps so that we can talk about things as we go through the shelter stuff too, because we are having conversations to make things happen now, because we have to. What's going around to the board, just hang tight on that. I'll come to that in a little bit, but that way you have it when I get to it. First thing, just touching base.
So if you don't know, we've made some staffing changes. And so Cindy King is no longer interim. She is the animal services manager. And as we've gone through this 6+ months, I think recently of change, we also have realized the magnitude of work that it is on the back end of the shelter to create those partnerships and programs to help get our animals out the door with a shorter length of stay. So we created a new position, community partnerships and programs manager, and that is Jillian. Is she here? So, and so because of these changes, we had to restructure staff. And so I'll let Cindy handle that piece, but kudos to both of them. They're doing great things and will continue to.
Okay. I just wanted to highlight the staff. Y'all see me, y'all see Dr. Bender, y'all see Jillian during these meetings, but we have a whole staff behind us that makes everything else happen. So Paige is our shelter supervisor. She's actually here today. And then Dravis, Mike Dravis is our field supervisor over our animal control officers. Ashley Kaspari is our admin coordinator. So she has actually been moved from the role of vet tech and promoted into our admin coordinator. So she has filled that role, which has created another hole that we're working on, but that's okay. And Yenny has been moved up to our engagement coordinator. So Yenny will be working with our dealing with partnerships with the other groups and things like that. So she will be working hand in hand with Jillian on moving animals out. Trey and Amy are currently our ASOs, animal service officer, also animal control officer, just depends on what you say at that time. Kayla Randon is one of our full-time kennel techs. She started out as a contract kennel tech, and we ended up hiring her on as a full-time in March, I believe. And then Geneva Parker has been one of our contract kennel techs, and she actually goes full-time on Monday. So she will be moving full-time. And also Samuel Kraft has been one of our volunteers that we are hiring as a part-time kennel tech. So he will be moving from a volunteer status to actually as a part-time employee. So where do we stand on staffing? We're still working on those vacancies. So we do have the vet tech vacancy that we have been in the interview process for. The full-time receptionist, we are actually making an offer today. Tentative start will be May 30th for that. So that position hopefully will be filled. We will have 2 animal service officer positions that we are interviewing for within the next 2 weeks. As I said, the administrative coordinator role has been filled, as have the full-time and part-time kennel techs. We are still utilizing staffing agencies, especially with the number of animals we have in the shelter. We have contract kennel techs to help fill those spots. And for our veterinary technicians, we're actually utilizing RU, which is a staffing agency for vet techs. So we still have that coverage 7 days a week of either a vet tech or the Dr. Bender on site.
So just a real quick follow-up, heartworm, we're still doing the heartworm treatments. To date, 33 of our dogs have received and finalized their heartworm treatment plan. We do have more that have finished the doxycycline treatment, and then they go into the Duraban injections, and those will be later on in this month, just depending on the dates that they finished. Our interlocal agreement that Rob mentioned earlier with Fort Bend County to use their surgical suite has been completed. Tomorrow, Dr. Bender and the Fort Bend County vet techs are going to work as a team to go train together at the Best Friends facility, I believe, Best Friends facility. So they will be learning to work together tomorrow. And then our first surgery date in their facility is actually May 17th. That is a trial run, and there are going to be things that we have to make happen before we consider it a scheduled thing. But this is a huge first step for us, and we're really, really excited. I don't think anybody's excited as Dr. Bender is, but we're really excited about moving forward on this. Next Wednesday, some of our animals will be going, and it'll be some of theirs. So it'll be a combination of both facilities. Everybody heard about the distemper closure. This slide was actually shared with the board when we did an update last month. But I wanted to highlight that this really ended up being, this was a quarantine. This was not an outbreak. It was a quarantine. We contained it to the 2 dogs that came in with it. One did not make it, and one is thriving right now. So just wanted to, the stringent protocols that we had in place, the way we took care of it, the way staff took care of it, the way volunteers followed direction, everything went together, and we were able to actually come off of complete quarantine on April 27th, which 24 days after the dog was picked up. And it was actually, 21 days, 19 days after we had to close. So because we were able to do that. So how did we do that? Anybody who was at the shelter would have seen these maps everywhere. We did follow the strict guidelines, who could go where. Everything was color coded. Certain staff handled certain animals, certain volunteers handled certain animals. Those paths for those animals had to be followed. Best Friends medical director actually came out and visited, took pictures because she felt that it was best practice, and she was sharing with other shelters as far as how it was. I'm not gonna lie to you, it was really rudimentary, okay? It was really rudimentary on what we did. We put paper on doors. We put tape on kennels, and we put tape on floor. That's all we did, but it really worked. Everything was color coded. The doors, a kennel, in every path, there was duct tape on the floor for paths for each dogs or each group of dogs. And it was based on location. Husky's gym, even Husky's gym on the floor out in the middle had duct tape on it, so you could only go the one way. I only got the picture of the red tape on the door because I actually did not enter into isolation during this time. So I had the outside tape, but I didn't get a picture of anything further than that. So that was huge for us. Our staff did an amazing job. The volunteers did an amazing job. We were able to get volunteers, I believe, Jillian, a week after, we had to figure out a plan. And within a week, I believe we were able to get volunteers there to do dog enrichment. So, because everybody following through the rules and protocols, it went really well. Some of y'all may not realize, but when you call our 281-275-A-DOG through 364 number, you actually are routed through 311 first. They answer the questions that they can, and then they'll pass calls that need our attention on through us. Also, if they are busy, it does ring directly through to us. So there are some calls that come directly through when they are not able to answer the phones. And our call volume is very high. One thing is normally when you look at a graph left to right, it's time as time goes on. This was actually backwards. So on the left is the more current timeline. And I know the numbers are hard to see, but this is May is a little bitty one because we didn't have much data on this. And then we have April on back through November. As we review shelter numbers on our next slides, please notice stray numbers are increasing. Non-resident numbers are drastically increasing for us. It's important to think a lot of our shelter animals are not Sugar Land residents. These are not dogs that people in Sugar Land have lost. These are dogs that are being dropped in Sugar Land. Okay. We are not taking care of Sugar Land resident dogs. And we have a really good program that I'm going to cover as to why that is. So this was the current count as of May 5th. Was it May 5th that we did that? Oh. The morning of May 5th? Yes, the morning of May 5th. Dawn and I did an interview, and we saw our traffic increase tremendously after that. So these numbers were from May 5th. I'd like to give you this morning numbers because there's a little ray of sunshine here for us. Okay. Our shelter dog numbers were at 53, whereas they had been at 63 just last Friday. The cats are at 45. We do have 7 dogs in foster now instead of the 11. Some of them have gone out to a rescue group, or at least been assigned to a rescue group, even if they haven't moved too far yet, including Kane. Kane, one of our elderly labs, is fostering. Ellen? Anyway, Ellen has Kane. We do have 38 cats in foster. So as you can see, that number has gone up. We've received several litters. I will tell you that Jillian, Dr. Bender, and I are all doing bottle babies right now. Our fosters are full. Most of our kitten fosters have double litters, and we need help fostering. We need bottle baby feeders. We do have 5 dogs out on sleepover and 3 cats out on sleepover. Several of them we know are going to be adopted. It's just a matter of them getting in and getting the paperwork taken care of. We need adopters, but we need fosters. We need volunteers. It takes a lot of time to walk 63 or 53 dogs. It doesn't matter. It takes a lot of time to do it. We don't need you to talk about how we need to fix it. We need you to come walk dogs. Okay. So I know that there's been a lot of talk about us being over capacity and being closed to over-the-counter intake. We have nowhere to put the dogs. We have these signs on our kennels. Fortunately, I believe this morning we're down to 4. Okay, even better, even better. But our kennels are indoor outdoor. If you haven't been to our kennel or to shelter, we have indoor outdoor kennels. Unfortunately, with the capacity we have, a dog can't go out in the outdoor part of the kennel because there's another dog out there. We have to have barriers so that they don't go and crack the plastic guillotines, because they're not always dog friendly and they don't have a lot of space to move around. So it's not that we don't want to take the dogs. It's not that we don't want to go get the dogs. We have nowhere to put the dogs. All of our bangers are full, and our bangers are our portable kennels. And Jillian is continuing to reach out to rescues, and she's moved numerous numbers out, but we still have more dogs than we have capacity for. Our hallways are full. That's our hallway on the left. Okay. We have no employee break room. This is our employee break room right here. It's got 2 dogs in it right now. Dogs are doubled up when we can. If we know that they're going to be friendly with each other, we've doubled them up. I invite every single one of you to come see how we're managing the shelter. I invite you to come do a tour, come do a walkthrough, come volunteer. Like I said, dog walking, cat cleaning. Robin, Susie, Cheryl, they can all attest to how much cat cleaning we have now. We do have a good number, but we do also have several nursing moms. So we have litters of kittens. We always need dishes washed, dogs bathed. Christine comes in and bathes dogs once a week. Laundry to do. Come help, please. What's that? Yes, you do have to register. You have to register on the city's website. Register at Come Help. All right. I ran some data because, as I told Dawn, I'm a bit of a data geek. So I ran some data as far as our intakes and outcomes, and I ran it back to 2021 just to see an overall view of where you can see trends and things like that. This first slide is dog intake and outcomes. The blue scoring line are the stray at larges and over the counters that have been brought in. The orange, which you have spikes in a couple of places. That's a couple of things. That's when a litter is born in the shelter. It's when dogs are abandoned or confiscated through law enforcement measures. The other thing I found as I was looking through this is if a dog goes out on a sleepover at the end of the month, and it's not till next month that it either comes back or gets adopted out, it falls into that category. That it's come back from a sleepover or that it's out on a sleepover. So, so that was that one. And then the one that I passed out to the board, I know there's a lot of data on here and that's why I wanted you to have it in a bigger form. But what this is this is still the same graph. But what I did was I included several things. I included where we have our adoptions, our return to owner, our transfer, and then the top line, of course, is the total live outcomes that was on the previous one. The return to owners, I'd like to point out, like I said earlier, when dogs are being dumped in Sugar Land, they're not going to go back to owners because the owners have dumped them. And these aren't dogs that are lost. We do have a great lost and found, two great lost and found representatives that we work with, both in Greatwood and New Territory. So Charlene and Dee Dee, and we want to grow that program. And I believe that Jillian will cover more on that. But the other thing is, keep your eyes open. Too many people have cameras that will see these dogs getting dumped somewhere. There's too many cameras out there for people to not see what's going on. So keep your eyes open and say something about it. Don't just let it keep happening. So this is the cat data. What was really interesting as we look at this is starting last fall, other shelters started reaching out to us after our October hoarding case. But as you can see, we didn't have many strays coming in. Shelters across Texas are reaching out. They were now April, I think everybody's got kittens. But before that, they were reaching out and we actually did some transfers out because people were wanting cats because they didn't have cats in their shelter. Somebody wants cats, I'll give them cats. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of ferals right now, but so it was just really interesting to see that trend because that trend is not just us. That trend was, as we had heard, it was actually a statewide issue. The shelters in the areas just didn't have cats. Fort Bend County reached out, Pearland reached out, and several of the other shelters and rescue groups reached out, and we were able to transfer some of their cats out that we had. So this is just, again, a little more data. And the one thing that you'll see, cats don't have return to owners. Dogs, we get back to owners. Cats, they just tend to roam. So we end up with very few that come and pick up cats that they had, that they might have owned. We did communications because when we hit a crisis level, because we did not want to say we can't go pick up dogs out in the community. But we would have had nowhere to put them. At one point, we actually were down to one half kennel that was available. And some of our stray dogs we've been picking up have been in twos. So it would have been two dogs in one kennel if we had not had to do that. So we did the news release on May 3rd. Well, there are several local media articles out there. The Community Impact, Fort Bend Star, Houston Chronicle. Dawn and I did a live interview with Channel 2 on May 5th. That afternoon, a Station 2 employee came and now has Danny on a sleepover. So we're hoping that that works out. But that was strictly because they had seen the interview. So that was great. And then yesterday morning, Champ and I went over to CW 39 and did an interview with them. So hopefully we're getting some media attention. We're getting some traffic. Like I said, Friday afternoon was crazy as far as traffic. As long as we can get the dogs out. Traffic's great, but we need to get the dogs and the animals out. So the next thing I want to talk about is our TNR pilot program that we have going on. Right now, we've had 7 cats that have been neutered or spayed. There were 2 different litters of kittens found. 4 were found on the 13th of April, which are now in foster care. And then there were another 3 discovered on the 8th that are in foster care. Nancy, is it about 10 or so left? So I believe there's about 10 or so left was the count of that colony that hasn't been addressed or hasn't been trapped. Please understand, we've only done 7 and we started this in March, I believe. This has been by 1 volunteer. Nancy's the only volunteer transporting and trapping cats. There were so many that spoke out about this program that we needed to do this program, and it's fallen on 1 person's shoulders. Okay, again, please step up and volunteer. There is you need to do an introduction with mall staff with this because you're on their property, and we have some things that waivers to sign, but we need more people to help out. We can't take care of the rest of this colony doing it 1 cat at a time. So this is just our monthly report for Best Friends report for April. Yes, they are on the website and they are posted monthly on the website for viewing. Moving forward, we have some training coming up for our staff. Houston Pet Set will be coming in Friday to do training with all of our staff regarding dog introductions. Best Friends will be doing training at the shelter on Saturday, the 20th for bottle baby feeding. Feel free to come invite friends, sign up as a foster, and come get some bottle babies. We have plenty, trust me. Gray Wolf Animal Behavior Training is scheduled for May 22nd. And Dr. Hogg behavioral training is scheduled for July 10th. Those had both been scheduled in April and had to be rescheduled due to the quarantine. And my final slide is we were really, really excited to be able to accept a $10,000 Petco Love Grant. In August of 2022, it was, we applied for this grant and we learned in I believe April that actually the end of March that we received this. This grant was requested specifically for heartworm treatment and microchipping. And due to the requirements of this grant, these are the 2 ways these funds can be spent. Just due to the writing and the constraints of this grant. So just so y'all are aware, we do have this money and it will be invested in heartworm treatment and microchipping. So. Does anybody have any questions? If I can just a little bit drilled
drill down a little bit into and kind of make it real. And along with some of the comments that were made earlier, yeah, we need to do something now. We don't need to wait for a new shelter or this or that, because something needs to be done now. And I think the staff is getting there and doing whatever they can, because the way it is right now and the request for volunteers, I will tell you, some morning shifts, there are 2 dog walkers. The afternoon shifts, we can have 3 or 4 dog walkers on an afternoon shift. And almost every time we have to go to staff and say, we need help getting these dogs out because we have to leave by 4:30 or 5. And the staff immediately, hopefully we're not pressuring them too much, or they're afraid of us or whatever. I don't know. They're afraid they're going to lose us. They're like, they get those kennel techs, go help the dog walkers, get the dogs out. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 kennel techs are helping us get dogs out. And that's with 3 and 4 dog walkers in the afternoon. We need more. We really need more, because when we say dog walking, ideally, the dogs get out for a 10-minute walk. When I walk my dog, it's for half an hour, and if we don't have time, well, that 10 minutes gets cut down to 7 or 8 or 5 or whatever, so we can get them all out, and the rest of the time they're in half a kennel if there's another dog on the outside. And the staff does what they can for these dogs on the outside, but it breaks your heart because the heat's here and there's a big, huge fan. Well, that's air blowing, but it's not cool air. And they've put tarps up so the sun doesn't bake them. But with what we've got, that's about all they can do. And I don't know if it's true, but it seems to me that all we're taking in lately is Huskies and German Shepherds.
Yes.
And you can't put them on the outside. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, my 2 cents.
But is there a way to revisit Wilco County's idea of giving volunteer hours for minors if an adult in their house signs to foster an animal?
I believe there's discussions on that, but that also falls under city policy for volunteers. I believe that's part of that's under, it's 14, yeah, yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
I would just like to add a comment to what you have presented. I had several interactions with you guys, with various people there, and I commend the carefulness of every employee. My fosters recognize some of the employees and want to go to them, and your kennel tech, and of course Ashley and Dr. Bender and others have really took careful effort to make sure that they stayed away a certain distance away when that was necessary, directed me where to be so that I didn't get into areas I shouldn't have been. And in 2016, I worked with an intern to look at different immunizations that we could give animals when they came in the shelter to see whether it was advantageous for us to ask council for the money to implement those things when animals came in, and reviewing 30 different organizations that had implemented that. There wasn't the benefit wasn't there. And so what you're doing, the distance and the routes that only certain, whatever we call that, is really what controls those diseases. That was the result of our study that was a whole summer long. And I thought you guys were doing it beautifully. This last month or two that I've watched. Thank you.
Just to comment on a couple things too, to kind of underscore the comments around needing volunteers. If I was following along and understand your numbers correctly, I think you gave a percentage, but would it be safe to say the majority of the animals that are dumped are not even Sugarland animals? Is that
Yes.
correct? So, when I hear, again, when we talk about in past meetings, the questioning or the concern around taking care of Sugarland pets, seems to me right now we're taking care of everybody else's pets.
True.
Number one. And number two, with regards to that, from what I've seen and what I've heard, thank you. Sounds like y'all are doing a really good job. And again, coming back to volunteering, I think that's critical. What I heard Dawn say is less than half of the people registered to volunteer are volunteering. So I hope that message is being received today by people here and who may be watching online, and that can take that message back. I mean, currently now I have 2 foster puppies at my house, not Sugarland foster puppies, but they are foster puppies. And I work full time. I'm not even at home, but I have the setup. It can check on them. I do work remote 1 day a week. I've had medical fosters that I've kept for up to 3 or 4 months. I had a foster puppy a year ago that had distemper, horrific disease. I watched it, very debilitating, worked with the rescue group. It didn't make it. So all of these things, the spay neuter release, that's pretty disappointing to hear that everybody that pushed for that, we have 1 person volunteering. So I think the message that I would encourage everybody to take forward is, what can you do? I reached out to Jillian by email because again, I'm working 40 plus hours a week in an office, but I can take fosters in my house that fit that life. I asked Jillian, what can I do on Saturdays? So what does that look like for individuals? To say we're not doing enough, and then I would ask, well, what are you doing to help, and how can you find what works? So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you for what you're doing. For really what I'm hearing is we're taking care of everybody else's dogs but Sugarland's. So thank you for that. And again, I would just underscore and encourage anybody to find a way that they can help, whether it's an hour, like you said, I'm going to walk 3 dogs for 20 minutes because that's what my schedule allows. I think we could work with you to fit our needs. So I know, like I said, I talked to Jillian and she'll probably be seeing me on Saturdays because
Awesome.
that's what I can give.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And here's Jillian.
Hi. I just wanted to clarify something that if you're not actively involved in the shelter, you may not have thought about based off some of the comments we hear. So when we were under the quarantine in April, one of the things that happened was we had new intakes that we continued to pick up at Duhossock Park. I know at one point we had 10 and it would fluctuate some. During that time, we were still taking animals, but we were not allowed to move any animals off of the shelter. And so what that meant was the only available dogs were the ones at Duhossock Park once they were off of stray weight. So what happened was we were asking for fosters, asking rescues, but essentially we kept increasing our overall number. So once we returned to normal operations, suddenly we had this big influx of the number of animals because not as many were going out. And it was basically maintaining 4 different sites. So we had PetSmart for adoptable cats, we had Duhossock for new dogs, then we had 2 different buildings with different regulations at the shelter. So just to give you a glimpse at the different struggles we had behind the scene, it's a lot to manage 4 different locations. With that, so you may know my buddy, my little sidekick's missing. So I'm happy to report that Bella did find her forever home, which leaves us without an updated ambassador. We're very happy with her. She's got a child or a family in the house who's her little snuggle buddy. And also, in the meantime, one of my pets, Callie, stepped in to be an ambassador because we conveniently had an event scheduled the next day with an elementary school or a middle school. And so we're still clearing and looking for the next ambassador. We have a few candidates, but we will be finding that. Just to give you some good news to start out. Our volunteers, I absolutely love them. So as you may have heard, it's taken me a while because my position started on October and again, I've transitioned, but overall at any given moment, I think there's about 245 volunteer applications that are approved. Now, if I randomly click on one, more than likely they haven't volunteered since 2020, 2021. So it does take time to go through to see who's actually still open to volunteering. But at a moment's notice, there's essentially about 30 people I can rely on. They're there regularly, and I would love to have more volunteers. However, it's really important to have regular volunteers. If you can come once a week, great. If you can come once a month, great. But that way it's not, you come one time, then you're gone and you never really learned anything in terms of the regular way we do things. So we even have some students that are getting ready for summer, and so they're coming more regularly because they have time. But it is important to emphasize if you can come regularly, that's helpful. Let me turn this so I can make sure. One of our experience that we did during the quarantine. So it was new for all of us. We did end up having dog walkers come back. We gave it a new role, but essentially they did dog enrichment in the yards outside, and each one was a different based off their quarantine area. So we were able to restore some enrichment after we figured out a safe plan. So that was something that was really important to us, because the day we closed, I can tell you the dogs were wild, like, what is going on? Why am I not getting attention? And I know for some people, it was really exciting to see once the volunteers came back, the recognition, like, oh my gosh, I've missed you. So it was really sweet to be able to witness that, both for the volunteers and for our dogs. We were able to get several animals out of Duhasik. So my goal was every single day, number one, trying to keep the number at Duhasik as small as possible, as close to zero as possible, because at any moment, field calls, they could be bringing in 4 new dogs. And at Duhasik Park, it's very small and there's a limited amount of pop-up kennels. And it's not great to be in a pop-up kennel all day, every day. So the first dog on the left, that's Aurora. She actually was adopted, I think 2 days ago, but she is the only dog that we had actually go into foster care from a citizen of Sugar Land. I'll come to this in a little bit, but despite many pleas, many posts, it was very unfortunate we did not have more response in terms of foster care, but we were able to get some rescues to help. We did have another dog temporarily go into foster care with a city employee. In the middle, we had our big guy. He was, I think, like 150-pound Great Dane. Houston SPCA picked him up, but we were doing posts saying, please help us foster, please help us in this goal. This is crisis mode for us. On the right are Barb's lovely puppies. So we did a Dog Days of Summer event. It is now that time where we can't do events outside. Last Saturday, we actually had one, which I'll probably talk about in 2 months. But in any case, it's just too hot to have anything with fur outside. So this was kind of the end of it. But even at this type of event, it is extremely unusual to take puppies to any event and have them come back. So the fact that we took 7 puppies, because you kept 1, so we took 7 puppies and only 2 left on sleepovers, that in itself should tell you something. So there's a difference between a normal, good, ideal world and a poor economy, high abandonment, and a low amount of time to take care of things. So there's a lot of factors going against us. So one of the things I'll talk about, even with volunteering, if you can't physically do things, totally fine, but you can join social media, you can share our posts, you can even just tell other people who do have that flexibility that you may not. The event we had last Saturday, that we actually had to cut short because one of the puppies we did take was close to heat exhaustion. So a quick douse of ice cold water and sent them back. But from that event, we had about 4 families fighting for 1 dog, and then 5 dogs that were just kind of hanging out, enjoying being outside. That is not unusual for one dog with its particular looks to be highly desirable to others, while others just are kind of there. We are, like I said, looking for new animal ambassadors. So we're vetting to make sure that they are appropriate for the different situations. So we had an 8-month-old puppy that I took, well, I think it was on Monday, to a career day at one of the elementary schools, again, outside. So now we're officially off the outside because it's too warm. And then some of the other volunteer programs we're looking at. So just ways to connect with the city. A big priority is what can we do to help prevent animals even coming to the shelter? I know 2 individuals were referenced, so we're looking at ways to share that information with other HOAs. It will be a pilot program. We don't have a cutesy name or any of that stuff figured out just yet. But the main thing we're looking at right now is trying to collect data from where animals are coming from, and to focus on those areas, whether it's a dumping area or people abandoning, we don't know yet. But just looking at how can we help those areas where they have high amounts of animals that do end up coming to the shelter. So stay tuned as we work on that program. So social media, I've got to say I was a little disappointed. So yes, I have a bottle baby kitten, which is not my forte at all. But when it was sick, no one else with cats can take it. So I get it. So we do lots of social posts, and I post my little kitty, super cute. And I have to say the duckling post from yesterday, pulling them out of a drainage, suddenly had like 3,500 views, which is insane for 300 people who follow our account. So anyway, everyone loves ducks. So congratulations. I'll keep working on different posts that are cutesy, but there are regular things that we need. So even if you just want to donate some items, things like slip leads and harnesses, a lot of times those might disappear, get gnawed on, and we just have to continually replace them. Same with bottle babies. Kitten milk replacement is not cheap, and there's a lot of mouths to feed, and we're not able to physically provide that. So we have to find replacements. We don't have any goats on site, so that doesn't work. So in any case, there are other ways to help, even if you don't have the type of job or actual flexibility in your schedule to physically help. Either way, it's still nice to come by the shelter to see what we have, what our reality is. That's just good for your own knowledge, even if you just find a little bit of time to come see us. So some of the rescues we worked with: Houston SPCA, Texas Chihuahua Rescue, Houston Yorkie Rescue, Texas Litter Control, and more. Again, wildlife, some of the regulars, possums, tons of ducklings, ducks, egrets, and more. We do have updates that the website is still being worked on. One of the things we're trying to do is moving away from what's called the Trello board, which is how we currently post our animals, and moving to an automated system, which would be so wonderful to me. You may not know it, but I manually change every single one of those pets. If it's a new arrival, if their name changed, if they were suddenly spayed, if they've, whatever the case, every single one of those is manually done by me, which is a huge amount of time. So we are moving to an automated system through the city. One of the other things, some of the new volunteer opportunities, I think we had mentioned before, we're working on rebranding. So the Petopia name will kind of fade away. We're going back to the Sugar Land Animal Shelter. So stay tuned for some exciting updates. We're working on some options for that one. So I just want to close my part. I heard a lot of the things that were said during the beginning. I know, especially as we're meeting every other month, sometimes it's kind of challenging because we come in really passionate. We're here because we love animals. I mean, I don't think anyone came in here because they're like, really like hockey. We're here because we like animals, so we have things in common. So some of the things I just wanted to address, just to make sure that you knew that I did hear you. So I love my job. I would say pretty close to my entire life at this point. So I came from education, little kids, little animals, similar in how you approach them, similar in that they're passionate people who want them to be cared for in a certain standard. But I do work all the time. I, like many of the staff, work 6 days, sometimes 7 days, sometimes it could be 30 days in a row, especially our animal control officers. So I don't mean to be emotional, but the hardest part of my job is the criticism from people who do not understand. I want to keep my job. I know every single one of our animals. I know their perfect home. And I know what would be good for them, as does Helen, as does Cheryl, as does Susie, as do the people in here who I recognize because they come to the shelter. I want you to realize that the words that sometimes come out of your mouth are hurtful to us. They may not be meant that way, but negativity is not the solution. We have to find solutions that are effective, and quotes such as, "We need stuff now. We need things to be done now." I do not disagree. Things like, "It makes me feel a bit ashamed of how this is being handled." Things like, "We are the most generous zip code." In my role, I do not see that. And it is very disappointing. I do not live here. And yet I have 3 dogs from our shelter that I foster on top of my own. I have a bottle baby kitten. We are here working all the time. I will admit, these words might be used against us, but sometimes I'm the one who's ashamed. I apologize that 6 days a week is not enough. I apologize that we can't get enough regular volunteers and fosters to make your goals work. I apologize if there's a misconception of transparency. I am happy to share my desk with anyone who wants to shadow what I do every day. Even today, multiple of us were cleaning kennels because we don't have time to get to our job until animals are cared for. So I'm not here to be emotional. I'm here for those of you who have not seen our reality. We love these animals. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get them into safe homes or rescues outside of our care because shelters are not homes. Thank you.
Now we will move on to item 6, Director's Report, item A, Program Updates.
Did not expect to cry, Jillian, but I appreciate everything that she does. Sorry. So speaking of what she does, she puts a lot of effort in. Before we had Jillian, we had a link, and this is just animals that have gone out on adoptions or outcome, rescue, they have left the shelter. It doesn't factor in the animals that are still here. We went from a 30+ day length of stay, I don't remember the exact number, I presented it a couple of weeks ago, to a 21 average length of stay. And that's because of what she does every day. So she's doing great things. I have heard things too as well. So there's a lot of Florida examples, and Pasco County is the one that we've looked at. Lake County, like you mentioned, Lake County. Florida's very different than Texas. Florida has a requirement. It's a state requirement that every high school student has to volunteer so many hours a year. Their volunteer base is enormous because it's a state requirement. You can't compare what we have to Florida, although we're trying to take those programs and try to implement them here. But like Rob said, every shelter is so different and they have what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And just because it works in Florida or California or wherever, doesn't mean it's going to work here, because what they have that we don't is the community stepping up, either because they're required to or because they just want to. And until we have people coming and helping, like if you want to volunteer, but you have to register first. You have to pass a background check first. We can't just have you come in and help us. We have to follow certain rules. You have to comply with certain rules. You have to sign our code of conduct saying how you're going to act and represent the city. Because when you volunteer, you represent the city. You represent us. And so you have to follow rules. Same with fostering. You've got to register. You've got to pass the background check. There are requirements. You can't just say, call me to help and I'll be there. You have to follow our process. We would love to have everyone in this room come in and help with various things. We could use you, trust me, like Jillian could use the help on the back end. We could use the help with anything, whatever your experience is. I promise you, they'll find a way to utilize you to benefit the animals and the staff in our shelter. So we hear that you're here to help, but actually show up and help. Call us and help. We will find something. We will make it work. We talked about the staffing changes. I think we are doing amazing things with staffing. We have amazing staff right now. We added those new positions to help on the back end because we do understand we are trying to build those partnerships. I don't think it was mentioned, but Yenny, who is now the engagement coordinator under Jillian, she was our animal control officer, but she came from the Houston SPCA, and the network that she has at her fingertips is significant, and it's making a difference. And so we've slid her into that role, to help build those partnerships, but those take time. It takes time to have conversations. It has time to meet with rescues. It has time to see what are their needs, what are our needs, to figure out like a mutual benefit. And when we're full like this, it limits the time that Jillian and them can do that. And so, but we are continually working to build those partnerships, and we are going to continue to do that in the future. I already addressed the concerns with the Pasco County and El Paso and Best Friends. Again, we are talking with anyone we can to figure out what programs work. And it saddens me to see social and the bashing of these entities. Well, who's going to want to talk to us if we're going to bash every entity that we talk to? So I would encourage y'all to let's look at the positives. Like every shelter has positives and every shelter has negatives. We're no different. And so we will be continuing to talk to the different ones. I will reach out to Lake County myself and see how they run, and we can have meetings with them. But we've got to reach out to learn from others. And that's how you get better, is by learning. And so we are continuing to do that. The interlocal agreement, multiple people have talked about that. I won't talk about that anymore, but we're excited to get that going with Fort Bend County and grow. And I know Dr. Bender's ready to do some spay and neuters because she's been missing it. But she's going to get her time to do that. We are continuing on a daily basis, looking at how we're operating. How do we improve our operations? What new programs do we add? What do we want to pilot? So it is a constant improvement. And so, like I talked about earlier, we do have a shelter. I know we are looking at other options, including partnerships and regionalization, but our job is to figure out what do we need at the shelter now to be sustainable. And that is what will be compared to the other options. So nowhere are we saying we're not looking at what we're doing, because we are. We're constantly looking at it. And we have to sustain it for the next year, 3, 5 years. I mean, however long until we get to a decision, and then also implement that decision. And so we're not just taking a back seat and not doing anything. We're constantly improving what's happening and trying to get these animals out to a home. Because I mean, Jillian's right, the shelter is not a home. We do provide the best care possible to them, but they need to be out into a home. We are going to be looking at some modifications to the ordinances going forward that will come to the board at a future meeting. Those meetings we did change to every other month, but we do have the option to add them if needed to talk about a regionalization, and we will do that. Not everyone on this board was here when we were doing the research and design for the expansion, but that was such a heavily involved time commitment that we actually had multiple days of workshops. So it's not abnormal for us to say, hey, there's a lot of work that's coming up and let's meet for longer or more often. And so we will make that change when the time has come to do that. I've also heard the regionalization schedule, like we'll get working. I think I've already, either staff or Rob have already addressed some of the other questions I heard during public comment. So with that, I will take any questions that y'all have.
I just have one comment. When I was looking back to regionalization, evidently in 2015, I understand that most of the strays don't come from here, and we really need to work on that. But the 2015 master plan, workshop found they forecast 70 dogs a month. They forecast in 2015, they forecast what our population was going to be. In 2019, the bond was voted on. If that's not, I understand that will take 3 years to build, but that is our population. And so hopefully for the budget for next year, can we just build in that temporary capacity some year? Because it looks like this is our population. And so we need the capacity and we need the staff to manage the numbers that were forecast.
So that the facility master plan was built on assumptions at that time. So it was based on the programs we had in the shelter at that time. It looked at length of stay. It looked at all of the data that we had and created that snapshot, right? So now we're in 2023. Our snapshot is different. It's changed and we see the trends changing with, I mean, back then we didn't have an issue with dogs being dumped from outside the city. It was not as common as it is now. So 7 or 8 years is a long time. I understand the solution of just add another building and you'll be able to house more animals. And that's true. And that's an immediate response to a problem. That's not going to help us solve the problem. I went to Williamson County. They have 4 buildings that house dogs. They are all doubled up, every single one. So it doesn't matter. Like we can keep adding and adding, but it's not solving the problem. And so We are focused on trying to solve the problem and implement programs to reduce the length of stay, to get the animals out, because that's the goal, to get them out, not to house them. Because even at Williamson County, I mean, they have I should have put it on here, but they have a picture on their door that says, your animal is not guaranteed life. Like, we're in the red zone, because almost every run has 2 dogs in it and it's doubled up. And they are a no-kill, right? And so, but they're having issues. So adding more space is not, I don't see that as being the solution. Is it a temporary solution? Yes. Is it a long-term solution? No. And so that's my job to balance that. Like, do we spend the money on a temporary solution, or do I spend money on creating programs that are going to be longer lasting? And that's my decision that I'll have to make. And I'm more on the boat of, let's figure out programs that are going to work. What do we do to help limit the number of animals that are coming in? Like, how can we stop people from coming to our jurisdiction and dumping animals? And so we're having conversations with PD on what we could possibly do under that realm. We are looking at, we have gotten quotes about what it would be if we added an additional structure. I mean, just like we did with Whiskerville, because I was part of the master plan too, was to create an interim solution to when we built a new shelter. We added that whole new portable building. So, and that is now housing all cats. Because if you remember, the original building was housing cats and dogs. We expanded it, and now we have cats in one building, dogs in the other. So we have expanded. We haven't not done anything. And because of the existing site being used, like, they have no break room, they have nowhere to eat their lunch. So that's why we are looking at potentially adding a building in front to give them a break room, to give them a front office space, which it wouldn't add additional capacity in that building, but what it would do is free up the spaces to be animals in Barksburg. But we're just in the initial stages of getting cost and what that would look like. It's very expensive, as we know, but we are not, it's not that we're not looking into it, but we've got to factor in both sides and what makes the most sense.
And thank you for looking into it.
Are we doing any sort of logistics on where we think these animals are being dumped? Is it a certain subdivision? Or, I mean, are we pinpointing when they're coming in? How are we going about trying to figure out where the dumping is occurring?
Yeah, so what the goal is to be able to have that data. It's in Chameleon, so it should be marked like where we pick them up. And even the 311 call data will sometimes have an address, and that can pinpoint as well. And so the thought is to get that data. Are there hotspot areas? I mean, we know parks are. I mean, everyone in the region, if you watch, they talk about, dogs being dumped or tied to trees in parks, because it's a common space and the city's going to respond, because you can't just leave a dog in a park. So we'll figure out those hot spots. We'll work with PD. Can we increase, patrols to hopefully deter them from dumping? Because when you see a police officer driving, you're not just going to open your door and throw your dog out, right? And then creating those programs, because you cannot abandon an animal. I mean, there are penalties for abandoning an animal, and we're not afraid to implement those penalties either. And then, and again, creating those programs on the back end. And so it's multi-pronged. There's not one solution for all of it. And so we're trying to work all angles, but data is a major piece of that, to figure out what HOAs are maybe the hottest areas. And then, like Jillian said, having those conversations, creating a program in that HOA to help us keep that animal out, maybe find its owner, or even find a home before it comes to us.
I think some of those hotspots that you are talking about and that you would identify by collecting data are going to be things that you might use long-term in the future. And I'm thinking about things like, what areas would most benefit from low-cost spay and neuter programs? That I'm guessing, I think my personal opinion is that some of that will go hand in hand. And so investing in that data on the front end, I think, could be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, spay and neuter, microchipping, I mean, we are looking at it all. It's just, we've got to get more data and research to then have those, to implement those programs, and some may require an ordinance modification, and we're willing to go and do that. And so as we have the time to do it, we are doing things, and I just hope that everyone sees that. I mean, we can't snap our finger and change it overnight. It is a process, and we only have so many hours a day. I mean, Jillian's not lying. Like I tell her, like, and I know the city does too, like, go home, you're off today. Like, you have worked way more than you should, and that's not healthy either, right? We can't work staff to the bone and expect them to be able to do great things. Like, there has to be a balance, because if I let them, they would work 24/7 and work themselves to death. And that's not going to help anybody, much less any of the animals that are there. So. Any other questions? We almost took the full 2 hours this time. Okay, well, our next meeting is July 12th. And we'll see y'all July 12th.
If there are no more questions, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Is there a second? Robin? Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.